Thank you, Mike. All right, friends. We're here to talk about Roger, our good friend who needs. No. All right. Couldn't help myself.
That's
Well,
good.
thank you all for coming to our first Intermediate 1 training session. Um, the way this is going to go, I don't have too much. I've got a few kind of philosophy points I want to hit on, but I'd like this to be more of a discussion than anything else. So I'll start just by asking for quick sync. Has everyone had a good chance to read the Guide 4.0 in reasonable depth?
Has it changed again?
I mean, of course, but probably you've read a modern enough version. Um, the guide will probably continue changing based on feedback from your sessions in very small form up until the day we release it to the whole club as a membership. But it is very much where it needs to be. Has everyone managed to read the lesson plans document? All right, good. Cool. So before we dive in, are there any major pieces that stuck out at us? Any major things we'd like to discuss? And then I'll kind of go into what I had in mind. All right, very good. Okay, so Mike and I have probably had two disagreements over the course of our professional relationship. And one of them is this. I think Intermediate 1 is the most important and most difficult of the intermediates to teach. Mike thinks it's Intermediate 2. Mike is wrong. All right, so this is why y'all are here. Intermediate 1 is for me, it's very difficult because we're going into this complete paradigm shift. By the way, Mike calls Intermediate 2 a quantum leap because he thinks that's bigger than a paradigm shift, but quantum is very, very small. So a paradigm shift between I know all of my characters and I have been on air and I have made contacts. I've exchanged my SKCC number and told you how well I hear you and where my state is. Going from that to why, yes, I do have a pet elephant and he's a pain in the butt and I've got to go feed him now, 7-3 goodbye, right? It's this much broader universe of conversation. And that's very hard because we're going into this realm of I don't know what to expect. Before, I know I've got your call sign, I've got your state, I've got your RST, I might have your number, and then we're good. If something flops, I can say again, you repeat those 4 pieces of information, we're home dry. This is a much more arbitrary and therefore much more difficult realm to exist in. In order to do that, we've tried to determine kind of what are the skills that we need to touch on to make this to facilitate entry into this open world. And so if the goal of Intermediate 1 is, paraphrasing from the guide, broad and effortless communication, I think the word effortless is in there, broad and effortless communication, then I'm going to break that down into just a handful of points that I think are important. To do broad and effective communication, you need to copy enough of the message that you kind of get the message. You need to be able to relax through it because otherwise you're going to miss a ton of stuff. You need to be able to adapt through errors, QSB, missed characters, missed words. And you need to be able to head send and reply articulately, full sentences potentially, so that you can serve up your end of the communication. All right, so I'll repeat those. Copying enough of the message, copying enough to get the message means there's going to be some play on ICR. There's also going to be some trust of what you're copying. It's not what I expected, but that's what I copied. So that's what I'm going to write down or remember, and we'll see where this goes. There's going to be, I missed that. I'm not going to panic for 3 words. I'm going to drop it, get back on the rails, and copy the next piece. There's going to be doing all that in a state where you're not fight or flight all the time, because nobody has a good time and nobody will want to communicate if they're petrified all the time. We all remember our first non-formulaic QSO, and it was terrifying. And then we want to be able to respond coherently, just as if we were chatting over coffee. So does that kind of make sense on the broad goals, the broad philosophy of the curriculum? Any thoughts on that?
Bill,
Yes.
I agree with you. Mike may cut my pay, but I agree with you that it is to for what I see coming in out of BC3 and attending my sessions, it is a total paradigm shift for them. And they come out of BC3 and they know all the characters and they know a little bit. But when we start getting into conversations and carrying on conversations, they really struggle. And I tell them, I said, well, if you don't want to participate, at least stay and listen. You will learn just by listening. And if some of them, they do end up participating. So I agree that it is a total paradigm shift from BC3 to Intermediate 1.
I'm going to make two notes based on what you said, and I'll be right back. Let's go to Ed.
I agree. I think this is a big shift, and actually, one of the things that I think is going to be interesting too is for me, rag chewing is my favorite thing to do, but I wonder if we're going to have a lot of people in the cohort who have no interest in doing it, because I think there are a lot of people that aspire to be, doing a CWT, right, and they want to get there. But I think even a lot of those guys never rag chew. It's kind of funny. I was reading the CW Ops newsletter, which is excellent, by the way, and I know they're starting an initiative, to try to get more rag chewing going. But it almost sounds like, as they're writing it, that they feel like they're aliens in the group in a way, because there are so many people that just want to go at the speed of light with their keyboard that they haven't really thought about having the sort of relaxed freeform copy. So I wonder how that's going to go. I hope it goes well.
I'm making a note because I have opinions with a capital O, but we'll put a pin in those and I'll be right back. Don, did you have a thought?
Well, as the least experienced operator here and someone who hit that speed bump in Intermediate 1, and I attended about three different instructors, and Bill by far was the best one. And I always enjoyed his class, even if I stumbled through it. But I couldn't always make the intermediate to my schedule. So there's a gap. I mean, I kind of went from BC3, BC4, get on the air, and then I've been on the air ever since. And it's kind of like, yeah, I need to go back there. But and what I'm doing, and this is kind of maybe a bridge, is I'm doing the transactional QSOs, but even today in like SKCC, I'm trying to add in things. I'm trying to incorporate things. Drew on Long Island was doing a POTA. I went back to him, good afternoon, Drew, blah, blah. So I'm working on the head sending and developing that skill myself, and I'm picking up some head copy along the way. But I can absolutely attest, this is a vulnerable spot. And I had one instructor say, "You're not ready for this. You don't belong here." And that kind of was, and what really irritated me was I had said audit, listening. I just wanted to absorb, and I was basically told I was unwelcome. So I never went back. So I think we have to be absolutely, and by the way, I don't think the instructor really meant it like that. That's exactly how it came out and how I took it. But I think this is a critical juncture in that transition where we're holding their hand to where, all right, now you got to fly from the nest on your own. So that's my 2 cents. And if I've just disqualified myself, I'll see you in BC2. Bye.
Don, was that in an LICW class you came across that?
It was.
That really upsets me.
Well, and again, I don't think the intent was there. What really annoyed me is it was a Saturday night. I was out of town, and I just wanted to, see what was going on. And I was getting pulled into this thing against my will, and that was the part that really bothered me.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let's address some of that right now. The first thing I pulled from Bill, I think, was how much do you push students? There's a real fine line. It sounds like, Don, you were pushed in the wrong way, and that's really kind of dangerous. I do my best to push people to the point where they're just a little less comfortable. And a lot of the people who know me well and who I know well, I then push harder. But I don't do that if I don't know them very well. Evan, I'll come right back. one of the big reasons I do that is because I find that people learn much faster when they are pushed rather than when they are left to sit and not do anything at the back of the class. Um, some people take that much better than others. I have had a few angry emails that I pushed too hard, that this is supposed to be a 20 word a minute class. Why are you sending it 30? This was like blah, blah, blah. It's a balance you have to find as an emotionally intelligent human and as a good instructor. It is a balance I encourage you to push just a little bit, but never to the point where it upsets someone. And then if they push back on you and they say, I don't want to do this, I just want to listen, you don't get to say, well, you don't belong here. Like that is some bullshit that I will not tolerate. So I've said my piece on that. Let's go to Evan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, being a professional educator, I've taught thousands and thousands of people over the years, and a couple things come to mind. One, students need to understand that it's okay to be wrong. You're gonna miss stuff. You're gonna get things wrong. That's part of learning, right? You're not failing, as long as you learn from your mistakes, right? So if you come into class and can't copy a lick, that's okay. Come back next week, give it another shot, right? And like you said, Quentin, you have to push them just to the edge. Don't push them over the edge. But if you make it too easy, again, if you're not pushing them hard enough, they don't learn. But if you push them too hard, they start to resent you. There's that fine line, and that changes, right? Not everybody's the same. So you kind of have to dial it up and down based on your audience. So, I'm 100% with you on that aspect of it.
There are people who will repeatedly come to your class and who will repeatedly not want to be pushed. I've gotten into a place where if they volunteer something, great. And if they don't, I just don't pick on them.
Well, and if I could interject here, one of the masters I've found so far in my brief time here is Randy, because he likes to, as he calls, ambush people, but he coaches them in such a way that they're out of their comfort zone, but they don't feel threatened. And I've been trying to adapt my style after that because I want them to feel comfortable, come back, but not feel like, oh my God, if I fail, it's over. So I think there's a way to do it.
Hey, Don, I think you've actually figured it out because watching you yesterday in the LICW challenge get on the air when you had that guy who clearly made it very, very obvious he did not want to get on the air, and you got him on the air, and he had his first cue. So that was
my
awesome.
inner Randy was right there.
Randy's a great model. There are a few instructors in this club that I look to very highly. Randy is one of them. Terry is one of them, if you've ever been to his class. The first time I went to Terry's
But that was
class,
the thing about Bill's class. I really enjoyed Bill's classes. I just couldn't because of the timing. Because he didn't care. He probably doesn't care either. He just wanted to make sure you were having fun. We were always laughing, and it was great when things went off the rails. That was what the pleasure of that class was.
I do love to like fall off the rails on what we're doing, and then, oh, that's curious. Why don't we go down that rabbit hole and explore that one? That's a ton of fun. Terry's got this magical character. If you haven't been and you're not QRQ, do what I did, which is I was at 15 words a minute, and I thought, I got an hour free. I'll go to Terry's class. And I walked in, and people were letting it rip at 40. And Terry said, what do you want to do? And I said, oh, I mean, I'd love to do that someday. He said, no, but what are your goals now? And I said, I'd love to armchair copy at 25. And he said, that's QRQ. You're at 15, you want to be at 25, that's QRQ. And by the end, he had me copying phrases at 35. By the end of that 1 hour, right? Terry is a masterful instructor. So if you have a moment to go watch him.
And for the record, I've never been to Eric's class either, so I don't want anybody to think that I'm throwing Eric under the bus. I am not.
All right. One thing Evan said that I like, it's okay to be wrong. There's an expression from Tom W0FN. You didn't make a mistake. You have an opportunity to practice. It's just an opportunity to improve. And so we've kind of internally hit this It applies mostly to ICR of random group type stuff, but if you're getting 70%, you're doing well. That means you're in that learning zone, you're in that struggling zone, and you have to be able to endure that for some period of time. We don't have to be at 70% for an hour, but we definitely have to be at 70% for a large part of it. Okay, good. Often what I found, especially in the later intermediate, is 70% of a message depends on the 70% you get. I get one guy who can copy 50% of it, and he gets the whole message because he gets 50% and he fills in the holes. And I get another guy who gets 50% and it's just every other word. And just no way. All right. Something else that was mentioned, the contesters, the non-conversational desire, and to what Don said as well, the plateau and the speed bump. These are connected in my head, and that's because for me, contesting is going to strongly push on your ICR, but there's a whole swath of other skills that support it and are supported by it. And if all we're doing is ICR, it's like you're practicing for weightlifting by only using your left hand. Right? You're gonna have a big weakness on one side, and if we do both, they will go faster together. One regret I have is that a lot of people are interpreting our new intermediate curriculum as a pure head copy thing. I don't think that's what it is. Head copy is definitely an important component as you get up there, but we're not trying to train only head copiers. There's a guy in my advanced class who can write at 35 words a minute. Good for him if that's how he wants to do it. But most of us do block out at about 20, and that's when we start needing to head copy. And the thing is, if you get up to 20 and you've been writing and suddenly you need to head copy, you're going to suck and you're going to hate it. So if we introduce it 10% at a little bit at the beginning and then ramp it up, it's going to be a lot better. All right. I forget who said this, but there was something about going from basically point-wise information, like here's my SKCC, here's my state, to full sentences in conversation. And how do we get from there? It's going to involve a lot of phrases and a lot of focus on this kind of relaxed state. And we started calling some of that familiarity. And so an example of familiarity, there's several ways to do it. But the thing you're going to want to be doing is pressing an awful lot on people's expectations of what they're about to copy. And so the easiest way to do that is, let me turn on my oscillator here. It's going to be something like, tell people what you're going to send and then send it. Dead easy. It's, I like cake. Probably need to turn off my here, huh? I wasn't ready. Terrible. It's faster than an intermediate one, but they're all instructors here. I like cake. I told you, I sent it to you. You were copying along with me, hopefully. You were verifying what I was sending. We can do another one, cats and dogs. Let's try one more. Up and. Up and what? Left. I've been reducing the amount of information I send you. What about if I don't give you any information? Can you still fill in the rest? Wet and dry. If you're able to capture that first word, the rest you can go into verification mode. So that's one way of doing familiarity. Another one, familiarity is a new concept to the club in general. We've just started introducing it into the BCs, and so your newer students are going to start knowing what this means. And some of it might be R. At the very basic level, you know exactly what's coming. You're familiar with the sound. at the level where it's phrases or sentences, you can play with it and you have a whole lot more latitude to do so. Another thing you can do is prime them in another way. And you might say, I don't know, does not make a great pet. Elephant. That one's for you, Bill. Context.
I make him not send that ever in my classes anymore. I've heard elephant so many times, I'm tired of it.
So context is really, really important at these levels, and you can definitely play with it. Ed and then Ken.
I will say I stole some of your stuff that you were doing in the last session that we had. So I did the busy for the kids class. So I did a busy picture, and I also did the prefix and suffix. I have never seen them more engaged. They were loving it. Like it was. I got all of them to send. I got all of them excited. We came up to the top of the hour. They weren't ready to stop. So I'm excited. I'm excited. It's not always that way. So it was nice to see that, and they were really seeming to get it. And I had a wide group that had a wide variety of skill levels, and there was something for all of them, and they were all having a blast.
That's awesome. Those pictures are a great example of visual priming, and I think I've seen most of you have seen these. Here's a busy picture, and at intermediate one, you might verbalize a question and have somebody answer, and then the rest of the class can think about their answer and see if it lines up. And it might be something like, "Hey, Evan, what kind of animal is the lifeguard?" And hopefully Evan would answer, and you're going to get the odd student who will answer, and that's great because they're going to get the first 2 or 3 letters of squid and go, "Oh yeah, okay. You can't tell an octopus from a squid, but that's what it was. Good." And I copied that. And that's more verification. It's more familiarity. It's more priming the pump. All right, Ken.
What do you think about either showing the text as you're sending it? Some teachers call that read aloud.
Okay, we could do that. I might even have a setup to do that here. I don't know that it's ready, but
I don't know how valuable that is. That's my question.
It's a fine line between valuable and distracting. And
Okay.
let me see if I'm able to spin it up real quick. I don't know if I am, but let's try.
Okay.
While I'm spinning this up, other thoughts on any of the stuff we've talked on so far? We kind of went down that first rabbit hole and just started talking, which is perfect. But we'll come back to the course and curriculum shortly. All right, let's see. Video device. Give me a video device that looks like my face, ideally. No, all right, never mind. Okay. So all this to say, those skills of getting into this generic mode of copy is really going to involve relaxing your students, priming their expectations, and allowing them to know that they can copy more than they think, and to keep them relaxed while they do it, because it is a hell of a leap. While we've kind of philosophized about that, we've actually made concrete some of the skills that we think are important to this, and we've tried to put some exercises to them. And the key skills in the manual for intermediate 1 are fluency, loose focus, and familiarity. So we've left ICR aside because hopefully the ICR comes from BC2, BC3. We're not speeding up, we're staying at 12 over 12. And what that means is 12 over 12 on average. If you want to go down to make it a challenge and go down to 9, 8, 7, go to town. You want to push them to 15, go to town. short bursts. Either way, the variation is incredibly helpful. It develops an ear, it keeps them engaged, and it allows them to copy more than boring old machine code. Speaking of MPP, I'll come to this later, but if you want to show people how to use the MPP, great. Otherwise, don't use it in class. Everything should be hand sent, ideally, mistakes and all. What kind of keys are we using? What are we comfortable with?
I mean, I'm good on everything. I've got paddles, a bug, a straight key, and a cootie here, and I can send good on all of them. So
You can send 10 to 15 on all of them?
well, the bug I probably couldn't unless I put Speed on it, but other than that, yes, I can.
Perfect. Others?
I'm running a straight key or paddles here. I have a bug, but you don't want to hear me send on any speed on that thing.
I'm primarily a paddle guy, but I can do straight key, and RBN picks me up. So, but I always like to I run one of my paddles into the rig, and then I've got that in the mixer here. So
Yeah,
I run them all.
I don't have a bug. I run a straight key in class because I have better control over it and I can do things. I could use a paddle just as easily, but I prefer the straight key for BC2.
Very good. Eric in Florida?
I usually use a dual lever paddle and turn it down. I have a single lever that I like for 20 word per minute and faster, but for some reason I can't send slowly on it. So you go back to the dual paddle.
Perfect. So I don't think we want any bugs at intermediate one. First of all, it's going to be very hard to send to 12, but they are a funky business and they are beautiful keys, but they are not appropriate for, I'm just trying to move into general conversation. Cooties are fine if your fist is pretty good. I especially like to show the differences between keys in character formation. I talk about the cootie slurring, and so if your finger space is a little narrow, and I like to talk about recognizing keys on the air. And the way that's helpful is it helps students focus on that character formation. At this stage, they're going to be shaky senders. They're going to be able to send their call sign. They might send it slurred together because they're so used to sending it. It's the only thing they're confident with. Hopefully they can send 599. But you're going to want to be quite careful around sending quality. And you're going to want to integrate other student feedback into sending quality. That's going to be very delicate at the beginning because it's going to be a case of, hey, Evan, your sending sucked and I didn't get a word and it's your fault. We don't want that.
That's probably true.
We're going to want to, so one of the reasons you want to integrate student sending is because it makes the students listen and pay attention and try to understand what they are getting and what they are not getting. Why didn't you get that? Because Ken got it, you know? Is it your ear? Is it Ken sending? Is it that Evan's not used to the cootie he's suddenly going 35 on? You know, what's the deal? The other reason is hearing different types of feedback from different people is going to be very good to reinforce a good fist. And honestly, 50% of the battle of conversational is going to be, how can you send well? And that's going to mix a good accent, a good fist, with you chose the words that were in theme, in conversation, and simple enough. And so there's going to be a lot of thinking on the fly, a lot of, Evan, tell me about your pets. No, stop thinking about it. Don't write it down. Get on the key. All right, good. Okay, cool. Check my notes real quick. All right. Any thoughts on that so far? And then we'll move on to maybe some of the head copy stuff. Ken?
I have a friend, Jim, who's local, and I'm very comfortable with him. And we head copy and send most of the time at probably 12 over 12 or something. But once in a while, I have to write the word down, and it's a simple word, and that's because I can't spell. But I want to emphasize the comfort that I have with this guy. I know his fist, and that's the thing. So, but when you get out to try to talk with other people, as we have, then that comfort kind of goes away, you know. So somehow we need to address that, I think, or I need to.
I get a regular email from a student in my class who keeps telling me about his wonderful code buddy. And I've been to some of their code practices. This was now like 2 years back, but they were self-reinforcing really bad habits. And that's really dangerous. And that's why this variation of FIST is going to be important. Your students are going to be doing half the sending in this class, and you're going to be encouraging and uplifting what they did well and gently putting a highlight on where they can grow. Ed.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I got a new foot pedal, but unfortunately, it has 3 buttons, and I hit the wrong one, so I apologize for that. So the question I have: how hard should we push them to be head copying? Because I imagine there's going to be a lot of people that, as we're going through exercises, are going to be gravitating to pen and pencil. Should we sort of just put out there every once in a while, hey, if you can head copy, give it a shot? Or should we really be saying, you really need to be head copying here? And how far should we go?
That's a great question. Evan, you have a thought?
I was just going to say that, head copying is super important. It's also hard to do at slow speed because they don't have that mental buffer to hold all those characters in their head, right? It's way faster to head copy at 25 than it is at 12. So that plays into it too.
There's a lot of that. And so the head copying you'll be doing is going to be restricted to some of the simpler exercises. That might be a word, maybe a phrase if it's, you know, really a nice punchy phrase that everyone knows. The goal we're aiming for is 10%. And what 10% means is 10% of the class, 6 whole minutes. Call it 5 minutes by the time you've done your intro and your hellos. 5%, 5 minutes of the class for a head copy specific exercise where you say, I actually want you to head copy this. And it's okay if you don't get it. And I'm not going to pick on you if you don't get it. I'm going to ask for volunteers. Let's do a quick one now. I'd like to combine some head copy and some student feedback. So I'm going to send you just a few words, and I want you to tell me what I sent and how badly I sent it and where I could improve. Find my mistakes and give it to me gently. All right, I'm going to calibrate for 12. So 12 sounds like this. Not my finest sending. Who got what I sent? Nobody at all. Ed.
I think I got the first 2 words, I'm eating, but I didn't catch what you were eating.
Good. After I'm eating, I introduced some slurring. All right, what happened in I'm eating? There was a mistake in I'm eating.
You missed an I.
Yep.
I missed an I, E-A-T-N-G.
Yep.
And then what I was eating was ice cream, but there was no A in cream. And then the E was tacked onto the C, and the R was tacked onto the C as well. So, so let's hear it. What was good and what was bad?
Quentin, you suck.
I like it, Bill.
Give that man a raise. Evan.
I was going to say a lot of the character formation, at least some of the characters were good. Character formation was good. Character spacing could use a little work though.
Very good. I did try to keep my character formation good. The time it slipped was in the last M. I held on to the da. Right.
Well, one thing I do stress, because we do partial sentences, phrases, even a whole sentence. I have a couple that will do 2 or 3 sentences at a time, but I stress if their word spacing is not halfway good, I will gently mention, please remember to give more word spacing, because I've had some people it's just constant sending and no spaces. Okay.
I actually have a thing I typed up that no punctuation, no capitalization, no spacing, no nothing. And I'll put it on the screen and say, read that. And of course, nobody can. And I'm like, that shows you the importance of proper spacing, right?
That's a really good way to communicate that. I like that. How was my word spacing?
Started out okay, but then it did not. It dived.
Yeah. So there were 4 words, which means there were 3 word spaces. My first 2 word spaces between I'm eating and eating ice were okay. Ice and cream were kind of glued together. Good. All right. The other thing I did, let's see. It started with I'm, which is a tough word, right? Because we want more than that. It's not I am, that would be easy, except if you send I am like this. That was one word. I am, exaggerated space, but I try to always highlight that. The short words, the 1-letter words especially, super easy to glue together. And so mention, hey, it's super easy. You're committing a very common crime, but it is something we need to watch out for. And so why is starting with I'm not a good idea? Because we don't send that apostrophe, because it's a little, is he sending image? Is he going to imagine? Okay, eating ice cream, great. There was no context. Ice cream was butchered and mangled. One person got it. I'm eating ice cream, if sent perfectly, is probably pushing the limit of head copy at intermediate 1. Don't have your students send that kind of thing for head copy purposes, but absolutely have them send a single word or 2. Send it to them in chat if you don't want to verbalize it. Otherwise, prime them with some context. Is what kind of animal is your favorite pet? All right, hopefully they won't send elephant, but they might send. And what do we say to that? We say, A, dog, fantastic word spacing, very consistent character spacing. Character formation was great. It was easy. You may ask them to start with the word A, just so you can poke at that and so that everyone gets that lead in. All right, that's a little bit about head copy. You all know me, I love head copy. I'm 100% for it. I tried to sell Mike on a 100% head copy curriculum a while back, and he shot me down real fast. But 10%, 5 minutes, dedicated head copy. The rest of the exercises, hey, you want to try to head copy? We're only sending 2 or 3 words. We're sending phrases that are opposites, cats and dogs, wet and dry. Perfect opportunity. Nice, short, easy, simple words. Formulaic, which is what we're trying to get away from, but it's only formulaic in the sense that it's a routine exercise. Done.
Just a quick one. I'm not sure this is that rapid a departure from where I already am in the BC2 curriculum, because when I'm sending words in the second half of the first hour, and some of the students are sending, most of them are head copying, and we try to stress that. And then when I do either Randy's or Steve's sending class, same thing. We're having them send 1 or 2 words, and you get a lot of people nodding, and some people don't. But it's a sending class, not a copy class. So I'm not sure I'm hearing anything right now that's a vast jump from what I'm already accustomed to, unless I'm missing something.
No, here's a secret. We tried to figure out what the best way to go was. We built this curriculum, and then we looked around and we said, here are a few people who are already doing half of this stuff. You get it. We're in agreement. What we're trying to do is arm you with more equipment to do so, try to formalize some of the skills and the words around using those skills, and then empower you to go and do that at the right level. Mike, any more words to that?
Don, that's very insightful. Our curriculum used to have significant gaps There are no gaps anymore. There's considerable overlap between the phases. So yes, you're right.
Thanks.
Ed.
I will say you just have to be careful with the kids, because I've had in my classes kids send superfrolicagilisticexpialidocious. I actually copied that, and then there was another kid who sent pneumono ultramicroscopic silicon of oconiosis. That I did not copy, but yeah, it was one of those things where I almost had to stop. Like, yeah, no one's going to copy this. Yeah, it's like, let's keep it a little shorter.
Moreover, nobody's ever going to send that in real life.
Yeah, I hope not. Boy, that would blow my mind. That a rag chew. Goodness.
I've had 2 or 3 highly technical rag chews, but with a person who was equally technical. And so one of my very earliest ones, I was at 15 words a minute in John St. John's class, and one of my partners in crime there was Rob AC2GO, and he and I had a rag chew on Zoom, and we started talking about the rings of Saturn, which is what he studied as a scientist. And so, you know, you're expecting some technical words there. I had one on the air a few weeks ago about PHP coding, and boy, that was tough. But actually, the hardest rag chew I've had was in French, which is my first language, it's my mother tongue. But because I've never rag chewed in French, it was bloody difficult. Supercalifragilistic is not going to be a common one, but it's a great fun one to throw out there along with elephant once in a while to show, hey, you only got the first 4 letters, you knew the rest of the word, good job. Use that autocorrect, use that premonition, that anticipation, that fill.
Yeah, in fact, one of the things that sort of grabbed my mind was the frolicagilistic, that part of there, because that's no other word has that combination of letters, right? So, yeah, I had a great rag chew last night with W2AEW, who I don't know if you guys know him, but he's Alan's a great guy, and he's got a YouTube channel. We were talking about building QRP rigs and stuff like that, so it got pretty technical, but it was a lot of fun. We ended up talking for like an hour. It was fantastic. So, you know.
Alan's how everybody knows how to use a nano VNA. He's the nano VNA guy. Yep.
That's awesome.
And if you go deep on his YouTube channel, I mean, it's almost a full electrical engineering education. I'd say.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Well, his day job, I think he's doing education for Tektronix. So, yeah, he has a knack for being able to make things accessible, which is cool.
That's amazing. I love that. All right, quick reset. How are we feeling? Are we more confused than when we started? Are there any major gaps or questions biting at us right now?
No, I'm feeling a lot better, to be honest.
Glad to hear it. Good. All right, let's talk just a little bit more about one of the other big concepts we introduced recently. Is this idea of loose focus. You've all heard me talk about it before, and I've used words like just be zen, let the come to you, relax. Mike had a nice saying, he called it alert indifference. All of these are ways of copying where we'll try to stress that students shouldn't be leaning forward, grabbing onto each letter as it comes in, trying to go, what the hell was that? R, okay, put an R in the buffer. Oh crap, what's the next letter? You don't want to do that. Take it easy. And it's, when the students are stressed, it is really hard to communicate that and to convince them that trying less is better. And we have a few exercises that try to promote some of this. It is going to be very hard at intermediate one. A lot of these skills will not be present. And so you're going to have your work cut out for you on some of this. So we can look at some of the exercises together for a moment. But first I wanted to ask, how many of you have really witnessed this loose focus as a calmer, better, more rational, more comfortable way of decoding? And how many are still very confused by it? All right, good, okay. It's really not even that easy to talk about, and it's incredibly difficult to demonstrate. Ed?
I have an example that I've given to some students and also just people talking too. It has to do with, with Kurt's audio files, right? One of the times when I'll listen to them is in the car, and I find it's easier. And the reason why it's easier is I have to focus on not dying. So as a result, like, I'm in traffic, I can't focus on it entirely. And I would find, like, let's say if things are going easily, like if I hard focus on it, it's harder, right? So I'll miss it. I'll miss the thing. And then all of a sudden the word pops into my head, and it's like, oh, no, this should be automatic. And it's like, the more I relax, the more I don't focus hard on it, the more it comes to me. And it's one of those things I've tried to, because I think a lot of people can relate to the idea of being in a car and being able to give only partial attention to something. And so that seems to have clicked with some people when I've mentioned it.
It's a good analogy. It's a little threatening, but it is a good analogy. Let me show you real quick some of the exercises we have listed on in the appendix for the lesson guides here. This is the Appendix A for the fluency resources. What I want to show you here is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the 6 first exercises here are all Intermediate 1 compatible, plus or minus. Fluency is a bit of a low-hanging fruit, and that's what we're doing here. That's what all of Intermediate is about. Everything is fluency. Conversation is fluency. But if I go down 1 to loose focus, we only have 2 that are Intermediate 1 friendly. And that's because a lot of this stuff just requires skills that your students have not yet developed. And that's okay. You're going to have to be focusing on loose focus. You're going to have to working on loose focus along the way by priming the pump, by making them comfortable, by relaxing, and by helping them just rub it in that, hey, you anticipated that, you knew it was coming. And if you didn't, you were able to back copy and error correct, you did that. That is a loose focus skill, and we need to keep going on it. Probably one of the easiest is this flashcards one. The reason I like this one at Intermediate 1 is because some of these are reasonably long. So the exercise is share your screen, showing an expression or a pithy sentence. And then it says here, stop sharing and ask a student to send what was written. If you want to make this maximum easy mode, keep it on screen and send it yourself and have them follow along. And so I'll show you one of those now. There's this deck over here you can click on. Boy, my computer is real slow right now. Let me kill some of this other stuff. Go away. All right, flashcards. All right, let me kill this too. Let's go away. All right. Time will tell the story is the first one. Follow along with me. This seems really easy, but it's actually ticking a ton of boxes. One of the things it's doing is it's promoting a good feel for word spacing, character spacing, rhythm. The other thing is it's flexing hard on this familiarity thing. They know what the sound is as it's coming in because they can see it right on their screen. If you want to make it more difficult, let's go to, I'm going to show you this. You need a good game plan. And then I'm going to stop sharing and then I'll send it. A little harder, but still not terrible. But somehow it's a really good way to promote some of that rhythmicity, some of that fluency, as well as that just relax. You know it's coming. There's nothing at risk. I'm not going to pick on you because you already know the answer. And then if you want to have your students send these things, you could do that too. And that's a great opportunity for student feedback. All right, Evan, here, let's try it. All right. Evan, I keep picking on you. Let me pick on Eric for a moment here. Eric in Illinois, you're in the shack. Eric, this is your sentence. You do make do with what you got. Make do with what you got. And I'm going to stop sharing. Over to you. Oh dear, he wasn't prepared.
No, I'm sorry. I don't have my thing. Let me make sure you can hear the key here. Is that loud enough? All right.
All right, very good. Thank you, Eric. Let's do a round of feedback here. Who would like to? Well, first of all, how did everyone copy? Everyone followed along okay? All right. Did anyone notice anything that made it difficult to copy that had you not known the answer beforehand?
My spacing at the beginning.
Yeah, tell me about that. Where do you think your spacing could have improved?
The first couple of words, I slurred them together. The first couple of words.
Okay, so just a tiny bit of irregularity. I actually thought in general your word spacing was pretty good. There was one problem with the spacing, and it was in the word make. The E was tacked onto the K, and it sounded like. It sounded like a Mac instead of a make.
Yeah, that's what I heard too.
Now the E is the shortest character. It's another super easy mistake to make. People do it all the time. Let's just point that out. And then I might say, if I wanted to, I might say, Eric, send me make again. Right, and he could do that. All right. There was one more error in that sending. Who caught it? Nobody got it? All right. Let me see if I can pull it up again. Make do with what you got. It was a wa you got. There was a T missing. Nobody missed it. No, nobody got it. Why? Why did nobody catch that mistake? Let's talk about that. Anticipation. Your brain corrected. All right. And you
I
knew
didn't
the
hear
answer
the
going
T,
in.
but I assumed it was what. I didn't hear the
Exactly.
T either, but I assumed that it was what.
Exactly.
Actually, I meant wah. I didn't mean what.
Tough crowd. All right, good. So that's a great exercise. Some of those, the thing I like to do, especially at the early level here, is constantly be explaining why and how these places interplay. So we've talked about, you knew the anticipation. That's why you didn't even miss the T, right? Your brain filled it in. Let's talk about the spacing and the sending. Let's talk about how familiarity plays into it. Let's talk about how anticipation is generally helpful, but how it can bite you sometimes. And then you might give an example of that. Let's see. Example of that. What do we copy? Ed.
Cats and data.
Yeah, it's basically me. Cats and data. All right, what were you expecting to hear?
Cats and dogs.
Cats and dogs. I led you on. I even started that third word with a D. Who was able to pivot? Did you note that you were copying what wasn't expected, and did you pivot back into an active copy mode? Yeah.
It did help that you gave us a little hint ahead of time. I will say that.
And these lessons don't have to be cruel. We're not here to ambush Randy style all the time, but I love Randy. These are really good examples to show that anticipation is a wonderful tool, except if you don't allow yourself to correct it when it misleads you. Done.
I need to break here if that's okay. Are you guys going to continue for a while, I assume?
We'll continue, and we'll send you the recording when we're done. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us,
Yeah,
Don.
and thanks. And I'm going to send you an email about the recording, something I just realized, but we'll talk to you later. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Take care, Don. All right. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about lesson format, because what we've been doing here is very free form, and that's kind of how I run my lessons as well. They're not overly structured in time. I try to notice what's going on with the class, and then I try to dig in if there's an opportunity. And so here we had this opportunity. The T was missing in what, and so we talked about anticipation and we demoed it. There's a ton of resources made available in the lesson plan. You should be able to pivot quite readily and pick the tools you need to explore the skills that you find are lacking or ripe for work. Does that all make sense? Does anyone feel kind of, do you want more structure, or is that freedom good?
I like the freedom because we have a variety of kids that learn differently, and so sometimes you need to work a little bit more focused with one or two kids, and otherwise the rest of them get it. Yeah.
And I guess I'm pretty lucky because in my time slot, I usually have a dozen people or less. I have a lot of regulars and I know what they can handle, what they can't. Somebody that comes in new, I always ask them where they are in their CW journey, and we'll try to accommodate for them some things. So, because I don't want somebody bugging out, that they're there. I would hope they'll listen even if they're not catching everything.
Good.
I like
Yeah.
the freedom for spontaneity purposes. It continues the conversation. Sometimes you're not going to know what's coming at you, and then you've got to respond to that, and not something that's prepared or ahead of time. And I love that, and we do practice that quite a bit.
Good. I think Evan had a bit of a counter opinion, maybe.
No, not so much. I just coming from a class that's super structured, it's just going to be a big change for me, right? Because I'm going from a scripted, I've got it down pretty much to the minute, to kind of more free form. So it's going to take a little bit of getting used to, is all.
It sure is. But you can throw all that out the window. Let's put Ed first, and then I'll tell you a little bit of how I approach it. See if that's helpful. Ed.
Yeah, no, I was going to kind of make the same sort of things. There is a certain ease that comes along with the BC classes because it is so structured. Although one thing that I'll probably end up doing myself as well is sort of creating a scaffolding, right? Because there are a lot of these different. In other words, I'll probably try to go for, okay, here are certain slots of different objectives, and maybe here's a grab bag of examples, and then before I go on, I'll probably just, okay, I'm going to go here today and try to keep track of what I did, so I vary it a little bit so that as people are coming week to week, it seems fresher, but while still also trying to hit those time marks and get them as much of the items as I can. But yeah, maybe having sort of a loose, like, hey, here are the main points. Here are some things to do in there, and then go at it might be a helpful thing. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Here's what I usually do. I always start with a warm up, which is me sending for some amount of time. If it's my NV1U class, I will send for 5 to 8 minutes straight. I will send at 20 words a minute solid, and then I will say, what the hell did I just say? What was that about? And someone might say, oh, there was something about breakfast in there. You probably had a croissant or something. Great. Okay. What else was in there? And we'll go around and see who picked up what. And eventually, probably like person 2 or 3 had like a full copy, and we'll just like regurgitate it nearly verbatim. And that's great. Generally, I write this down so that I can actually tell it back to people verbatim for their copy. For intermediate 1, 5 to 8 minutes is too much. The guide says start with a representative sampling of letters and characters. You can do that, but I think you can also send a sentence or two. Here's maybe an example. Here's maybe how I'd start. If I knew that the people in the class were reasonably okay with this, I might start with this. Grab your pens if you want, head copy if you like. I'm going to tell you a little bit about today. 2 short sentences, exaggerated word spacing, tiny bit of Farnsworth. We don't have to make this crazy difficult. It's a warm-up, but it is also complete English, very little context. The context I gave you is I'll tell you about today. If it's something quite specific, I might say, let me tell you about the plumbing incident I had, right? And then you're kind of primed for that. Here I left it pretty loose. Who copied? Just Ed? Ken, some? Yeah, got it? Okay, all right, good. Eric in Florida, tell me a little bit about today.
About my day? Okay. Let me turn on something so I can.
No, tell me what I just sent. Tell me a little bit
Oh,
about
what
my
you
day.
just sent. You went to lunch with your wife and you had pancakes.
Very good. I went to brunch with my wife and I had pancakes. Very good. Well done. That was a good copy. 2 sentences that follow on from one another. If you're going to do that, it's good to prime places where it's helpful. So I play bingo is harder to copy than I played a game of bingo. I played a game of bingo is longer, but now you're expecting a game of something. I know a weird word is coming rather than just bingo straight out of the way. Prepare your little sentences like that. I just source them from my day or my weekend. Any old story. It's often food related because that's just me because I like to eat. But there was one about how we got caught in a snowstorm in Castle Rock, Washington. And so I sent Castle Rock. I sent the town of Castle Rock, that kind of thing. That's a great warm up. That gets people going. It's low threat because there's a whole class and you might say, who got a piece? Tell me a word or two. Tell me an idea. Did you go to brunch? Great. Was your wife somewhere? Okay, good. Anything like that is sufficient. And that's a great way to start. Once I've done that, I'll generally have picked 1 or 2 exercises from the whole stack, and we can look at these in a moment. And then I'll play with these in some way until I'm kind of satisfied that we've gotten something from them. I always leave room for conversation. What did we get out of that exercise? What worked? What didn't? Why is this helpful? And then if there's time, we can have a 3rd exercise. If there's not time and we want to focus on just the one, we'll just do the one. That's perfectly fine. And then at the end, I'll always do, this is just me, but I always do a bit of speed racing. What speed racing is I'm going to crank up the speed just a notch at a time, and I'm just going to send well-known expressions a little faster and a little faster. Now, if your people are writing, that's perfectly fine. Let's try a few. Grab your pens and let's do some speed racing. Let's see what is a good one. How about?
Quentin, I'm going to have to get out of here.
All right, Bill. I'll send you the recording the same way.
Yeah, I would like to hear the rest of this, okay?
All right, 7-3, my friend. All right, so let's do some speed racing to wrap up. I'm going to send you just a well-known expression. I'm going to start probably at about 14, 15, and we're just going to go faster until we all break down. Here we go. And my rules for this, if you get it, shout it out. Unmute, shout it out, mute up. So let's play by those rules. Who got it?
Morning person.
Morning person. Very good. Here's the next one.
My cup of tea.
Cup of tea. No man is an island.
Man is an island.
Off of his
Off of
head.
their head.
Off of
I'm just scrolling through my list here. All right, last one.
Easy as pie.
Easy as pie. All right, very often in NV1U, I start the speed at about 25 or 30, and we end up at 40, 45. Now, the name of the game here is one, it's fun. Two, it is pushing character recognition, which is not a listed key skill for Intermediate 1 because we're not trying to speed up, but the variety helps, and it is a fun little way to end. The other thing I like to do is throw a real wrench in the works here, and I'll say this isn't speed racing so much as just speed variation. And so I will send you something at that speed, which was probably 20 plus, and then I might send this. Point and click. All right. That's a real threat for head copiers. All right. They hate that. They hate going down to 8 words a minute much more than they hate being at 40. Now, in your class, you're going to have fewer head copiers, but a little bit of slow, really slow stuff out there is good fun too sometimes. It is a challenge.
So is there any upper limit you'd say as to how fast we should go in doing an exercise like that?
If your class is doing well, go to 20. Yeah. There's the risk of alienating that one person who is just not getting it. So just try to keep an eye out for that. But all things in variation.
Well, I was going to say one of the things I tell my BC1 students is like if I send something a little bit faster than 12 words a minute, because occasionally I'll do that by hand, I'll tell them it's okay if you can't copy this. I don't expect you to be able to copy it at the speed, but if you can, that tells you that you're learning, right? So I make them understand up front, don't be afraid of this. If you can't copy it, it's not a big deal because half the class can't either. So
Absolutely. Yeah. My folks in my class know that the last 5 minutes of speed racing and speed play, it is a challenge. You're not supposed to get most of it. Some people are really good at the high speeds, and they're often the ones who chime in. Some people are really good at the low speeds, and they can keep up. Some people get everything, and some people get close to none. It's only a few minutes, and it's a challenge, and that's the goal. And by the way, in the exercises, there's a list of 2,500 well-known phrases that you can pull from. So we got you covered. All right. So Ed, you were saying the skeleton of the class. That's mine. A few minutes, liberal copy of a couple of sentences, something real from my life. 1 or 2 or 3 exercises, primarily student copy with some exceptions. Some days I do most of the sending, but I try to have them do all of it. Plenty of space for conversation and learning. Why did you find that difficult? What would have made it easier? How can we improve that sending? Let's pick it apart. Sometimes I'll pull up Audacity and record, and then we can look at it. And that's pretty helpful. Has everyone seen this kind of thing before? All right, let me demo a little bit. So I use a software called Audacity. You are welcome to use that or anything else, but Audacity is pretty cool. Let me share my screen and I'll show you it. So this is my Audacity here. There's a little record button. And if I click record, it creates a track, and this is me talking, which is not super helpful. But if I switch to my key, then suddenly you can see the trace, and we can zoom in, and let's do it. All right, this is supposed to be VVV. I see a few issues with this already. All right, let's look at it. This is a dit. That space is about the same. Dit. So the space between dits is pretty good. This looks to me like it's longer than 3 dits. All right, that's a. And then what is this? This is longer than an element spacing, but shorter than a word spacing. So what's going on? So we can get in really to the nitty gritty. You can do that a little bit. It's pretty fun to show people what some of the sending looks like.
How do you scroll in and out like that? How do you zoom in and out with there? Do you do it with the mouse?
Yeah, just the mouse. That's just the scroll key. There's also another thing I like at the bottom here. There's this selector. I set it to the length, and I don't care about the rest, but the length of the selection. And so what that means is I can go in here and I can say, all right, a dit for you was this long, 71 milliseconds. Let's do 3 dit lengths. That's this, right? Dit, quiet dit, that's 3 dit lengths, 228 milliseconds. Let's look at the DA. All right, 356, that's substantially too wide. Let's try it again on the keyer. And I'm just gonna create a new track. I'm gonna go to track, new, mono, and I'm gonna just pick it. And I'm gonna do that again on the straight key, and we'll see if we can match the pattern a little cleaner. All right, let's zoom in, do our calculation here. 3 dit lengths is 309 milliseconds. My DA is 305 milliseconds, 300 milliseconds, perfect, 3 to 1. Let's look at my straight key. Oh boy, I overcorrected. Look at that. This is 250 milliseconds. Well, maybe not. Yeah, 223 milliseconds. All right, cool. This is really getting into the nitty gritty. It is. But then you can do things like talk to people about that cootie slur. And visually, it makes a real impression. Right? Where's the space between the elements? Right? That's why it sounds like it's really slurring and it's hard to copy. These are much more distinct. The other reason I like this is I can send a full sentence and we can look at word spacing, and that is often very effective because you can zoom way out and you can say, can you see the words? I can see the words, right? Let's try it real quick. All right, zooming out. Look at that. You can tell the words just visually, just eyeballing that. That's pretty great. All right, and then you can zoom in and you can say, all right, how is your character spacing? How is the word spacing? There's a word space between I and like. Here's the character space between the L and the I and the K and the E. It's generally quite consistent. It's maybe a tiny bit short here. I'm committing that sin that everyone does, where the last E is tacked a little too close to the end. There's ice and there's cream, and it's pretty clear. Good. All right, so we can do that. You can delve into as much detail as you like. This kind of level of nitty gritty I keep for the odd occasion. Definitely don't want to do it too often because it's getting really nitpicky. But if you find a good opportunity to demonstrate, a message, then go to town. All right, we've been here an hour and 15. How are we feeling now? Generally pretty good. Shall we take a quick look at some of these exercises we've got? Have you taken a look at them? A little bit at the resources, okay. All right, let me pull up my, all right, here we go. All right, so most of the exercises are accessible in the intermediate lesson plans, right? So you've got the this wonderful lesson plan document, and then we'll say something like intermediate 1 lessons. The objectives we've talked about: fluidity and fluency, the ability to express yourself easily and articulately without reference to a script, smooth and effective exchange of information. Prerequisites: your students will come from BC3. We expect them to know all of their characters at 12/12. We talked about our warm-up, and then the exercises should be pulled from these. And so if I go into one of these, then we can pull from, let's see, we can do some flashcards. And so I showed you some of those flashcards. If we wanted to pull from some loose focus, we got a few there. Maybe some familiarity exercises. There are quite a few there that are suitable for intermediate one as well. And back to Ed's point at the very beginning, some of them are more contest-like. Most of them are not, but there are the odd ones like call signs and serial numbers, in which case you might want to, this one is a Carol trick, as she just sends call signs from the CW Ops roster. Why not? They're call signs. There's a random number generator, and then there are some of these kind of DX call signs you can pull from. So good copy there. The other place we have these, I may not have sent you this document, but the LIC, the intermediate exercises table of contents, it just lists all of the different exercises. And then on page 2, they're broken down by intermediate 1, 2, and 3, and then by skill. And so if I know I want to be teaching an intermediate 1 class tomorrow, maybe I want to do some word building with them. I might look at word association type exercises or homophones. Okay. Know what's coming is another one I like a lot. We talked about this familiarity and priming them for what's coming first. And so you might just read some of this out. Hey, it's raining cats and dogs, and then I'll send it. And that's an easy way to prime that. And then here we have some of these opposites that we were sending earlier. So plenty of resources there. I would be very, very surprised if you ran dry of exercises anytime soon. Eric.
What's the thought process behind saying it and then sending it instead of sending it and then saying it?
A few things. The first is it relaxes the student.
I'm sorry, it does what?
It relaxes the student. It removes the stress of having to work hard to get it. And so it works on familiarity rather than decoding. The second is it promotes things like rhythm. If it's a whole sentence, then you can really listen to the characters when they come. And in fact, we have an exercise built entirely on this. It's called duets. And so duets is available at intermediate 1 if you want to pull it up. The goal here is to share a sentence in the chat, and then you send that sentence and you have your other students send it on top of you while they're muted. So let's do this one together. Let's just do, oh, how time flies. Oh, how time flies. I'm going to zoom into it. All right, everybody mute up, grab your key. We're going to be at about 12 words a minute, which sounds like this. All right, I'm going to send 3 V's, and then I'm going to send oh, how time flies. Try to follow my rhythm. How'd everybody do? Were you on top of me? Did you deviate at some point? What happened? Little deviation, Evan, tell me about it.
Well, my word spaces were a little shorter than yours.
So were mine.
Yeah, so I had to compensate. Toward the end, I got right on top of you when I lengthened those word spaces up a little more.
Good. Yeah, I like, personally, I like generous word spacing. I find it's very helpful to copy, and so I do send that way. Now, we could really exaggerate the word spacing, but this is a great time to talk about that and mention how it's really easy to run stuff together. And you had your exercise, you had your file that you demonstrate there. Another great point to time that up. All right, so to Eric's question, what's the point is there's more to copying Morse code than decoding, and some of it is being in a mental state that promotes an easy decoding. It promotes memory and retaining things and understanding. It promotes error correction and anticipation and flow. And in order to push on all of those things, something's got to give, and we're just pulling back on the accuracy lever. So we're just going to tell you what we're sending. And then like we did at the beginning, I might tell you the first few, and then I might tell you the first half of what I'm sending. Cats and you probably know what's coming. except if I trip you up and I send cats and data. Does that make more sense? Somewhat still a little confusing?
No, I understand what you're saying.
And
I just not familiar with doing it that way. You
okay.
know, even in the Morse Ninja, he'll let's pick a word, for instance, because I'm trying to listen to high speed words, and he'll play it and then say it and then play it again.
Mhm.
So I'm just not used to saying what it is and then sending the code.
Yeah, he's kind of mixing that that modality. He's making you work hard for it, then he's confirming or correcting, and then you get it again. You get that to familiarize yourself with it, knowing what it is. I think he's just released a series, Mike. That is, it's what we're doing. It's he'll say it and then he'll send it a few times. So people are playing with it. You know, different people learn different ways, but that's why we have such a wide swath of exercises. All right. Anyone else? Ed?
One question, so maybe sort of getting to maybe what Eric is thinking too. I'm wondering. I enjoy the idea of the relaxed copy, and I think it's good. How do we point the students to the point where they know their proficiency? Because if they know what's coming, right, there's a bit of confirmation bias that happens. So do we want to do some things where we're not doing that, so they get an idea of, yeah, no, I'm getting this and I'm ready to move? How do we point them in that right direction if we're priming the pump all the time?
I don't think we're priming the pump all the time. There's plenty of exercises where you have no idea what's coming, who copied. Some of it, on the extreme case, is those call signs or random numbers or random groups of 5. Some of it is going to be conversational. And so one of my favorite exercises, it's kind of tough at intermediate 1, but it's just have 2 people talk. It's Mike, send Ken a little something about your weekend. And then Ken answer Mike. Now, at intermediate 1, that's pretty tough.
I'm sorry, I don't have a key, but
that's all right. That's all right. But you know, it might just be start with one person. It's Eric. Do you have any pets? Answer me with your key. All right. Did everyone copy? All right. Now, Evan, why don't you tell Eric why he should get a cat? They're cute. Great. 2 words. Perfect off the top of your head. There you go. So some of it is anticipatory, some of it is not, and we're certainly not priming at every stage. The ones we've talked a lot about priming today because I think to Eric's point, this familiarity stuff is confusing, and so I wanted to really make sure that we're all speaking the same language and seeing where we're coming from. Any thoughts? Yeah, Ken.
the way I look at it is maybe most of the time you're trying to get the student to automatically understand what's there, And once in a while, you need to do some assessment to see if there are not bugs, but if there's something areas that need to be worked on, like dit-dot timing or whatever, or maybe a group of letters that are difficult for them. They're similar in sound, but they're difficult for them to distinguish between them. So once in a while, we try to do assessment. Most of the time, it's just drill, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you for bringing me back to Ed's original question. I realized I just let that go right above my head. We don't recommend any formal assessment. The material you have at your disposition, the variety of exercises, is enough that you're not going to be covering all of it in a week, in 2, in 3, in 4. It's going to take you a hell of a long time to touch all of it. But there are only 3 or 4 critical skills at intermediate 1, and then there are maybe 10 skills in total across intermediate that we tried to develop. And so let me pull up that little diagram. All right, Student Instructor Guide version 4.2792. All right, we have world's slowest computer. This is my 2012 MacBook in the shack. This is the computer they gave me when I did my postdoc. All right, so this is a skill diagram that we had back in the day. We've tried to rejig it a little bit for intermediate. Mike, where'd it go? Oh, there it is. Thank you, Mike. Well done. All right. Intermediate 1 is kind of these bottom 3. There are a few things that you're not going to be touching on. Retention, how much of the message did you remember and memorize in order to understand what was being said? We're not going to be doing very much of that head copy at that length. Increasing effective speed is not a priority at all in Intermediate 1. We want proficiency at 12. We want broad general communicative proficiency. And so you're going to be focusing heavily on these skills. And I've shown you some of the exercise from them and where to get them. How do you assess whether someone is good at this, good enough to move on? The goal of the class is to communicate. Are you communicating? Are you understanding general things? Now, there's a ton of different facets to that. I have someone in my advanced class who can copy at 30 words a minute, but if you send something just a little differently, they completely flop. Just face on the ground, I got none of it. Big thumbs down from them. And so there's a skill that's missing there that we're trying to wrench open and promote so that they don't fall off that horse so much. Once you're there, once you've really touched on all of the skills, and after 4 or 5 weeks of doing different exercises that promote different skills, Ed, you did really well on all of that. Get out of here. Go to Intermediate 2. But we don't recommend any formal assessment. I don't know if that's a dissatisfying answer, but I'll own it if it is. All right. Cool. I think that's most of what I wanted to just communicate. So I'm very happy to just open it up to conversation, questions, thoughts. I'll say just before that tomorrow night, 7 p.m., I believe, Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, I'll be teaching Intermediate 1, just covering from someone who's stepping away. So if you have a moment to attend and want to observe that, you're very welcome to come on it. All right, are there any other thoughts, questions, anything that comes to mind? Do we feel like we're kind of in line with the broad idea of what this is trying to do? Does it feel like a paradigm shift from BC3? Does that feel bigger than a
It's going to
quantum
be
leap?
it's going to be a really big change for them coming from very scripted formulaic stuff to this. Yeah, this is going to be rough for them at first, but I think it'll be beneficial.
I hope it won't be rough. I think due to the nature of what we're teaching, it just cannot be so structured. I think the opportunity to discuss what we're learning and talk about it and extract that learning in English is crazy helpful. And I don't think there's any real set of exercises that could teach all of this in a to the minute kind of way. So yes, it's going to feel very different, but I'm hoping it won't be rough. Maybe the hardest part is going to be getting participation out of your students. I constantly want feedback. Ken, how did you do on that one? Ed, how did that sit? What are we learning? And I'll challenge them too. I'll say, Evan, why are we doing this exercise? What are we learning from it? And I really hope that they can come back with those words that we use often.
I want to point out real quick that in the Parks on the Air CW Activators Discord, I happened to mention a few weeks ago that we were going to be rolling out a new intermediate curriculum soon. And several of those guys, when I told them what it was going to be about, they were like, I'm in, I'll be there as soon as they roll it out. So there's definitely interest in it. These are guys that are perfectly comfortable at 25 words a minute doing a POTA activation, but can't rag, chew, head copy to save their lives, right? So they're kind of excited to have a slow speed conversational copy kind of class that will build that skill that they're lacking. So there's definitely interest in it.
And I get some pushback from this occasionally, but it is my belief that if you can do this, then you can contest. But if you can contest, you cannot do this. This is the superset, and that's why we're really pushing this. And I mean, as someone was mentioning, who doesn't like a little more in a soda or a POTA than just 599 wah moving on? It's like, hey, you sound good over here. I'm thinking of you on that mountaintop. I hope you're not freezing. Whatever it is, a couple of words. It'll slow you down, but it's so much nicer. That's my opinion. I had a conversation with a guy who was surrounded by a herd of cows. Believe me, that challenged what I thought I was copying. Like, cows?
Although you do have to be careful, because if it's one of the guys who can't rag you to save their life, you're going to blow their mind and they'll be like, cure that.
Well, like what happens to me is I can head copy fairly well. And if it's something that I'm expecting, I can have a fairly decent rag sheet. But when I'm doing a quick blast through trying to keep my QSO count up, and all of a sudden somebody comes back with a question, it throws me off the train. I'm just done. And then I have to ask them, wait, what? Usually if I ask them what they said, I can copy it. But man, that first time around, I'm not expecting it, throws me for a loop.
Yeah, you're in a mode of just you're anticipating everything, and then they come in with something, or you get the guy like I had a couple weeks ago who sent about 5 minutes of characters with absolutely no spacing in them, and I had to ask him to repeat himself, and then he sent about 10 minutes worth of stuff, and about all I got out of it was he wanted a QSL card, but he didn't have a computer, so he couldn't. It just went on and on, but it was annoying.
There are some hobbies where you make
one of the
some
things.
characters.
I'm sorry. One of the things that I've done with the POTA people is I'll say, "Oh, what park are you in?" Oh, it throws them every time when you ask them a question.
I don't know what park I'm in. I'm just activating it. Damn it.
Well, like I said, if you're not expecting it, it just throws you off the rails, and
So Eric, you got to be careful you do that with me, because I'm the DC area. I have a 7 for I do. Anytime when people, sometimes I've asked people, especially on sideband, like, do you really want all the parks? Do you really? it's like,
Yeah, and then you get to operating from a foreign country or something in a local dialect. You know, okay, I've got to send something I can barely spell. That's a good challenge.
yeah, when I was in Greece and had to send Sierra Victor 8/N2EC, like all of the rhythm I had before, everything got thrown off, but it was a blast.
And that's a great putting my teacher hat back on. Oh, what's that? You're stuck in your patterns and you need to branch out. Welcome to intermediate. All right, folks. So if you're able to watch my intermediate tomorrow, please do. I have recorded an NV1U class, which is, again, the same skeleton, just a whole lot faster and a whole lot more challenging. I'm also going to record an intermediate 3 on Wednesday. So you'll have access to all of those if you can't be there. Do we want to meet again, or are we feeling pretty good at this point? Evan's good?
I feel good. I'd say run it for a month or so and then get back together.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Are there any real questions on?
Well,
ahead,
speaking
sorry.
of which, when are we looking to start? What was the start date on that?
Yeah, so we had expected that we wanted to do some more get-together training, and so we can do that in another week or so, depending on schedules, if we want to. And then by the time the other 2 groups are done training, we're looking at 2-3 weeks down the line. So early to mid-February is the earliest we're switching. If we give you about a week's heads up, is that going to be sufficient to adjust to your new time? Do you all know right now what your new time is? Good. Okay.
Yeah. The good news is I already have a lot of that time cordoned off, because because I think I'm Tuesday at 9. So I have Tuesday at 7. I have the kids class. Then I usually do Mike's Rag Shoe at Tuesday at 8. So I'm just going to do my class and then fall asleep.
It's a lot of CW in a row. Yeah, very good. Good. Okay. So the big difficult question, are we, if I asked you to run a class tomorrow, could you do it? Yeah. I'm only seeing one person nodding really comfortably here.
No, I'm going to start Wednesday. I mean, I've already, as soon as you sent out the manual, I tried to adapt to some of the things in the manual.
You're the reason all of the students are seeing this leaking out. We found him.
It's me.
Oh boy. All right, good. How's your skeleton of class looking? Is it looking anything like I described? Is it very different? Your general class structure?
The skeleton of the class?
Yeah, the general structure. Like, I mentioned I've got a 5-minute kind of broad text warm up, a 5-minute high speed at the end, and a couple of exercises with a lot of discussion in the middle.
Yeah, I don't usually do a warm up, but I'm going to start doing it. Matter of fact, I was working this afternoon with some letter groups to be able to put out for a warm up, and I'll try to do 2 or 3 different exercises during the course of the lesson, and they're all going to send. I mean, unless they're stuck somehow, where like Ken, where he doesn't have an oscillator tonight, everybody's going to send back and forth. One of the things that I've routinely done is have one student ask another student a question in CW, and then they've got to figure it out and answer it. So, and then we go around the room and ask everybody if they got it. So, I mean, that's a real common one, that because the goal is to get them conversational. So,
yeah, and if they don't have an oscillator, there's always the code talking oscillator. I've made people do that.
I had to do that the other day in NV1U, and people struggled. My code talking is not great, apparently. Let's see if I can find it. God, what did I call that exercise? Paired QSOs. Yeah, okay, here it is. So Eric, what you describe, I haven't listed down an intermediate one because it can get a little much, but if you find the opportunity, go to town. Pair 2 students, have them go back and forth. First one asks a question, the other one answers. Great. There is very little in the way of resources here because it is open. I make it pretty thematic. If it's tell me about how was your Thanksgiving, or I'll just say, Evan, talk to Mike about the weekend, and that's enough. Evan will say, this weekend I'm playing soccer with my son. BK, and then Mike would say, that sounds great. This weekend I'm doing whatever. Perfect. The one caveat there is, if it gets to the point where student 1 has sent 1 or 2 sentences and student 2 has sent 1 or 2 sentences, and there's someone who's really struggling in class, they've just spent 5 or 10 minutes having no idea what's going on. So use judiciously.
You have to gauge it to the class that you've got. If I have real new people, I'm not going to do that. Exactly. Because again, I'll adapt the whole day to who I've got sitting there.
Perfect. Good. All right. Well, that sounds awesome. I think we're good to go. I'll ask again, do we want to meet once more next week, or are we now pretty happy to just get on with it? All right. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions. Try to catch one of those classes, ideally the intermediate one. I hope I don't crash and burn, but we'll see. If I do, then all of you will be in the room to help me. Yes.
That chart you had with all the exercises on it, I mean, I know they're listed in the curriculum guide, but do you have that chart with the links?
Yeah, I can share it with you now, and we can include it in the guide if it's helpful. There you go, sir.
Thank you.
All right, and just in case you're not familiar with the way Google Drive works, all of these things, you can click on them and this little box will appear, and it's only when you then click on the title again that it'll open in a new tab. So there's that. Okay, so we'll do this. I'm open for questions anytime. Don't hesitate. If any major questions come up, let's have a group email and discuss. If we want to meet again before we roll out, we will happily do that. If not, observe a class, let's rock and roll, and then we'll try to roll it out early Feb, assuming the other intermediate groups don't need excessive training. But as I was saying, I think you guys have the biggest challenge on your hands. The intermediate 3 is going to be pretend it's NV1U, dial it back a little bit. That'll be their training. And intermediate 2 will be closer to this. A quantum leap. It'll be a quantum leap, Mike. All right, friends, any final words? All right, I hope we're excited for this. I am. We have worked our asses off to get this together, and I think it's going to be a real good thing. Thank you all for your time, for joining us, and we'll see you soon.